took off his astronaut diaper that he had pissed in.
Yeah, there you go.
Because he was like, I just can't stop over from my trip to Georgia to Haywood County, which is only a few hours. I'm going to piss in this adult diaper. I'm going to throw it in the back seat.
Yeah.
Does that seem reasonable?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, maybe.
Yeah. So when the trial happened, McElrath was showing evidence that he never saw the victim again after their morning meeting at Denny's on December the 23rd. So the guy's saying, yeah, I met my son-in-law at Denny's. We had breakfast, but I never saw him again. So according to Jimmy McElrath, he and Stephen Boyer were talking in the Denny's parking lot. Another car approached. Stephen Boyer walked over to the car, began to argue with whomever was in the car, and that Stephen Boyer then returned back to Jimmy McElrath's car, told him that he would see him later, and departed in the other vehicle. So the two dudes sitting in a car at a Denny's, chit-chatting. One guy gets out, goes and argues with someone in another car, comes back. I'll see you later, man. Pieces out, goes and gets in that vehicle and drives away. And so, of course, after Stephen Boyer leaves in this anonymous, unidentified car with this unidentified person, Jimmy McElrath decided that he was going to drive up to North Carolina to his summer home.
Where he never goes at that time of year.
Well, his principal reason, I guess, for going to North Carolina, at least this is what he's testified. And remember, he told his neighbor, Clyde Kelly, that he had come up to North Carolina because he was visiting his father, who had recently been injured in an accident.
Okay.
So another friend, and I'm assuming this might be Clyde Kelly's wife, her name was Patsy Kelly, friend of McElrath, said that she saw and talked to Jimmy McElrath at the Pantry, which is a convenience store in Canton, sometime between 3 and 3:30 on the afternoon of December the 23rd. And she said that she stood with the defendant as he put gas in his car, and though she didn't look directly into the car, she didn't see anybody with him. And that the whole time they were having a conversation, which was pretty brief, that Jimmy McElrath seemed pretty normal, right? So you got to go back and think, like, if he has Stephen Boyer in his car, tied up in the back seat, laying down in the floorboard, whatever, and remember there was urine back there, is he going to stand and have like a normal conversation with someone? I mean, maybe.
Maybe, but it'd be hard for a normal person who doesn't typically, is not a psychopath. Because, I mean, I think you'd have to have psychopathic tendencies to be able to remain calm in that situation. Because you could imagine that he's not kill people all the time.
Right. I mean, I'm just thinking if I had a body, a person in my floorboard, I probably pumping gas. I don't know if I could just like have a casual conversation with a friend.
Right, but maybe he thought it would be stranger to that said friend if he just blew him off.
Right.
So maybe it would be in a brief conversation, admittedly brief, that maybe he thought, just did that.
But then, I mean, maybe he had him in the trunk of the car.
Yeah, could be in the trunk.
I mean, if he's guilty, we're just speculating.
Total speculation.
We don't know. So, she said he seemed pretty normal, brief conversation, whatever. Well, later McElrath said that he got up pretty early on Christmas Eve morning, December the 24th. He drove to his parents' house in Canton to visit them over breakfast, and that he did return home later that morning, and he did stop at the Crusoe grocery, and he did borrow that drill from the owner, Arthur Huber. Now, he said he borrowed the drill to do some work on the dishwasher water pump at his summer home, and that he needed the drill because he had recently lost the ring finger on his right hand in a boating accident, and he needed the power tool to help him remove some screws from the pump. And that he did work on the pump with that drill that he had borrowed for about an hour and a half after he got home. So Christmas Eve morning, he wakes up early, goes and has breakfast with his parents. Now, remember, he's saying his dad had an accident, an injury. He went to visit them. Then he stops by, borrows the drill, heads back home to allegedly work on this dishwasher. Obviously, I've had wine. I'm sorry.
No, it's
So
fine.
work on this dishwasher.
So it's the holiday season. That's another point, and he's left his wife at home, whom he never.
Well, she was in Georgia with the daughter.
Right. Oh well, I guess with the daughter's problems, maybe there's reason for that.
Okay.
I'm saying, it's a holiday.
Right. Well,
he's coming to see his father.
That's a little unusual, though.
Maybe
he
typically,
family.
you think he would bring his wife with him,
and maybe his daughter,
and maybe his daughter too, get her away from
distraction.
There, yeah.
Right. I mean, that seems like that might be feasible. So he said that after he finished working on that dishwasher water pump, that he decided to switch the tires on those 2 Pontiacs. Right?
Why? Does he say why? Because that just doesn't make any sense.
Well, he says that he was taking the tires from the brown Pontiac and putting them on his black Pontiac because the black Pontiac had recently been punctured.
Okay.
And so I guess instead of having it patched, buying a new tire, he's just going to switch the tires.
Okay.
Which, it's Christmas Eve. May not be the most convenient to go out to, a tire shop and have this done. Okay, so I'm trying to give the guy the benefit of the doubt here.
Right.
Playing the devil's advocate a little bit. So, decided to switch out the tires. And while he's doing this, of course, the neighbor, Clyde Kelly, comes over. They chat. They have a conversation. So after the neighbor, Mr. Kelly departs, Jimmy McElrath drained the water from the plumbing in the home, and then he leaves for Georgia in that black Pontiac sometime around 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve. So he spends the next few days with his daughter, Ellen, at her home in Georgia. She has an apartment. And then he and his wife, Nancy, decide to go back to Florida on December the 28th. And so fast forward a little time later, probably around the 3rd of January, I guess the wife, Nancy, becomes concerned about her daughter and decided to return to Georgia to stay with her until the divorce from the victim became final on February the 7th. So Jimmy and his wife left on January the 4th, and while traveling north, decided to go by the North Carolina home to pick up that brown Pontiac that was there and some of his wife's winter clothes. So they arrived at their summer home sometime around 4 o'clock a.m. on January the 4th. They slept until about noon and then immediately left to go to their daughter's home in Georgia. So at this point, the son-in-law has been missing, week and a half.
Oh, so they didn't have to go get the tire fixed on the other Pontiac?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't
there
really,
you go.
I don't have any details about that. So let's see. They go back, they, hang out, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So, go to the daughter's home, hang out, whatever. Well, you've got to remember, this is the same time that body is being discovered, basically.
Right.
Yeah. So, through all this investigation, research, what have you, they conclude that they think that McElrath was involved in Boyer's disappearance, murder, decapitation, and so he eventually ends up being indicted for it. And he was 49 at the time that he was charged with first-degree murder, and he was held without a bond in Haywood County Jail. But remember, all of this evidence is circumstantial.
Right.
So, weeks go by, the body is out in the woods, hunters find it, it takes them a little time to identify it. Now, I'm assuming if the divorce is happening, maybe Ellen, the daughter, may not be in contact with Stephen Boyer.
Right.
I don't know. But it just seems to me that wouldn't people be noticing that he's missing, and wouldn't that be like an active thing?
Seems that way.
And wouldn't the daughter wife, the daughter know, like, hey, my ex-husband, soon-to-be ex-husband is missing?
Right.
And
report it?
didn't he have
say something?
Breakfast with my dad?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's all pretty
I will say
interesting.
Dad's story in the parking lot, it sounds like total bullshit.
Well, so eventually, Jimmy McElrath is found guilty of first-degree murder of his son-in-law, Stephen Wade Boyer, and he was sentenced to a mandatory life term.
On basically circumstantial evidence.
Which is some blood, and then
Some
the weirdness of, like, there's holes in the trunk.
Right.
He's there at the time this guy's body, or, you know, goes missing. Then a couple days later, the body's found only 9 miles from his house.
Now, you think the holes in the trunk, you think that would be to drain water out of the trunk, maybe? Like you're washing the trunk out?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's got to be it, right?
Well, if you clean the trunk, yeah.
Yeah, but like you're cleaning it out, and then you realize the water's pulling, and you don't have a good way of getting...
Yeah, and if you go back, I mean, they say that there was luminol found. The luminol did show that there was some blood in the trunk.
Right.
Yeah, and there were also bits of blood found in the fender well near the license plate, those front seats.
Right.
So there had been blood in that vehicle, right?
Now, is this back when they couldn't just give you a DNA profile? This is in the infancy of DNA.
Right, 1984.
Right.
So, okay, so he's eventually sentenced to life in prison, and he served 2 years in the correctional system, if you will, here in North Carolina. He was eventually released April of 1988. So he was actually, I guess, convicted 1986, goes to serve this first-degree murder life sentence, you know, goes into the Department of Corrections and ends up, I guess, being admitted to Central Prison, eventually relocated to Craggy Prison, which, of course, everybody here in the mountains knows about Craggy. So serves 2 years there, and then, I guess, on an appeal, is eventually released.
Really?
Yep. Because, again, circumstantial evidence, and eventually is released. So the guy is now, I guess, in his 80s and living in Florida. I don't know if he still has a home here in the mountains, but, you know, is no longer serving any time on this case.
So he quite possibly, in a way, got away with murder.
Possibly. So Stephen Boyer's murderer, the assailant, never been discovered. His head and hands still somewhere, maybe, who knows? Could be somewhere around here.
That's crazy.
In Western North Carolina. And then here's McElrath just living his life, out of prison, possibly in Florida, who knows? And the daughter, you know, living her life. And you've got to question, like, did the wife and daughter know about this?
And why do it? If they're not fighting over kids, which you never even mentioned kids, so I don't know if there is
I don't think.
kids.
I mean, from what I can gather, I don't know if they even had kids.
They're divorcing anyway. It sounds like they're getting a divorce, and it sounded reported friends and family as being fairly amicable, and you know, like we're just going to do this as adults. And why kill them?
I know. So what is it?
Why kill them?
So your daughter's getting a divorce. She's depressed and sad. So what? You're like, I'm going to fuck this dude up. I'm going to
cut this dude's head off.
I'm going to cut his head off.
Yeah.
His hands off. I'm going to drain all this blood out of him. I'm going to fucking discard him.
Yeah.
Like nothing out in the woods. And I'm going to do it right down the road from my house.
So daddy's little princess can feel better.
I mean, is that it?
I don't know. I mean, there's like absolutely doesn't seem to be any motive. You know, if there was like this contentious custody battle, which, you know, a lot of times will create major problems, or, you know, that she stood to make all this money and somehow I don't see the motive to have murdered and cut this man up and throw him away like trash.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think, like, as you mentioned before, like just dismembering someone's corpse.
Oh, yeah.
That's just fucking brutal.
That's next level shit. That's that ninja level shit right there.
Yeah, that's like fucking extreme psychopath.
Very.
Like,
very.
Yeah. And then it just makes you, I mean, it's like if someone can do that